prep those Pokeballs and potions, as we're about to take a look at Pokemon Ruby for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance. But first, a big thanks to this video sponsor, TechRees. They're your one-stop place for all things tech and gaming news. Plus, they host live shows every Sunday on YouTube and Twitch. Follow the link on screen and in the description to check out their page. And be sure to drop a follow so you don't miss out. This edition, along with its companion game, Pokemon Sapphire, were released in Japan in late 2002, and the rest of the world in the first half of 2003. Many fans were looking forward to this generation's entries, as it was the first major upgrade to the Pokemon franchise. Being on the latest handheld Nintendo device that felt like a Super Nintendo in your hands, things like graphics, gameplay, and features were expected to eclipse those of the prior two generations. Was this transition to the pseudo 32-bit machine super effective? Or did players pass out in a Jigglypuff-induced slumber? Upon turning on the title, we're treated to a short intro movie and battle stinger, similar to the titles of the past. This time though, they're rendered out in a way that rivals some of the best Super Nintendo intros, but with even better graphics fidelity. After going through the usual name and gender selections, your character is seen in the back of a moving truck. Having just moved from Pokemon Gold and Silver's Johto region to the new Hoenn region, your character calls the town of Littleroot their new home. It's here that you save the resident Pokemon expert, Professor Birch, from a wild Pokemon. You choose one of 3 starter Pokemon from Birch's bag. There's the grass-type lizard, Treeko, the fire-type chick, Torchic, and the water-type landfish, Mudkip. You eventually get to keep the Pokemon you used, and get sent on a journey to become a world-renowned Pokemon trainer like your father, who happens to be the newest of 8 gym leaders in the Hoenn region. Along the way, you take part in Pokemon staples like catching wild Pokemon, battling Pokemon, having encounters with other trainers, and running into a named rival from time to time. This rival is just the character gender that you didn't select in the beginning, and for the first time, the rivalry is not antagonistic, but rather friendly and used to better each other. As for the usual bad guys of Team Rocket, they don't exist in the Hoenn region. Instead, you get entangled into a war between the 2 new groups of Team Aqua and Team Magma. Depending on which version you play, one team takes the role of bad guys, while the other team will call upon your assistance to stop the evil plans of their rival team. In Pokemon Ruby, Team Magma wants to harness the power of the legendary Pokemon named Groudon to expand the world's landmass, thus encroaching into the oceans. Meanwhile, in Pokemon Sapphire, Team Aqua wants to use the other legendary Pokemon named Kyogre to expand the oceans onto the world's land instead, both groups using underhanded and unscrupulous tactics to reach their goals. And of course, all that story eventually leads to the goal of challenging all the gym leaders and Elite Four to be crowned the region's Pokemon Master. Looking at the surface, the gameplay loop and overall story beats feel basically the exact same as the prior games. However, when you take a look under the hood, you'll see that much has expanded on a much deeper level. The addition of inherent abilities, new moves, and adjusted old moves makes the game very fresh on a tactical side. New Pokemon come with new stats and new quirks. Plus, the new story and Pokemon placement will make you change up how you used to compose your old teams. Outside of the story though, there's even more to occupy the player. Berries were introduced as a held item in the prior generation, but here in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, the number of berry variants were expanded 4-fold. You can control the growing of berry trees and bushes, and they were additionally used as a permanent stat boost for the game's other battle system. Introduced in this generation were Pokemon contests. These 4-way battles played out more like a pageant in narrative, but were very similar to the usual Pokemon battles with slightly tweaked mechanics. In addition to normal stats, every Pokemon had a set of contest stats too. Every move that a Pokemon has not only carries the usual battle types, but also contest types too. The contest types were limited to 5 categories of beauty, cool, cute, smart, and tough. And they all had varying effects on how the contests would play out. Winning these contests would yield rewards that you can use in the main game, including unique held items that you can't find anywhere else. Something else new to the series was the inclusion of double battles. They don't occur nearly as often as the standard one-on-ones, but when they did come around, the tactics required for victory changed slightly. New moves and some new Pokemon were designed specifically to work most effectively in these double battles. I'm glad that the standard battles were still the main focus, but the low amount of double battles in this game made it feel more like a gimmick than a whole new way to battle. I would have loved to see more of these and used to better effect. A new feature that I really enjoyed was the inclusion of secret bases. A few hours into the game, you were given a technical machine that can teach a Pokemon the move Secret Power. While it's a perfectly serviceable attack in battle, it can also be used outside of battle in some key areas on the map to open up caves and mountains and platforms and trees where you can make a secret base. Along your journey, you'll also collect things like furniture and decorations that can be used to make your secret base feel more homey and in your own style. This level of customization somehow gripped me away from the main game for extended periods. It was just fun to do, and it baffles me as to why Nintendo decided to heavily nerf the feature in the next generation, and then basically remove it for the subsequent entries. There was an attempt to bring it back in one future title, but it was just overcomplicated and felt less like itself. Overall, the gameplay experience of Pokemon Ruby hit a fine balance. The game felt familiar and easily approachable with features that did well in prior games, but also expanded those features and added even more to keep you occupied in many ways, without shoving them in your face. The gameplay of Pokemon Ruby gets a 9 out of 10. Early on, the game definitely starts to show you the glow-up that the Game Boy Advance is capable of, but you won't really see the true potential until deeper into the game. Instead, what the devs elected to do was start you off in simpler surroundings, almost matching those of the first Pokemon games. But what this did was showcase how everything you were familiar with from before has now become more intricate and full of detail. Environments now have access to lush palettes and more expansive shading capabilities. Walking through the grass gave a satisfying little shake animation on each square. Your character sprite, while still in sprite proportions, looked a heck of a lot less stumpy. You even saw actual Pokemon models when they existed on the maps. An immediate example of this is seeing the actual Machokes that are moving all of your belongings into your new home. Of course, the stars of the show are the Pokemon models themselves. You mainly see them in battles and in your menus. They're far more fleshed out with detail, and the addition of little environment pads for the Pokemon to stand on in battles just added a little extra texture to the previous blank backgrounds. Even though the Pokemon were still just static drawings, some minor special effects would be used to mimic attack effects. For example, if Pokemon had a stat increased, a blue animation plays over their entire model like they're powering up. Conversely, if they had a stat reduced, a red animation plays like they're affected by some sort of force. It's a small detail, but when you go through battles over and over, it just felt a lot better than just a standard screen shake. The design of the menus are not what I would call sharp, but they were a big improvement over their predecessors. Being a game aimed at children, I think they purposely kept these designs a bit on the softer side, which unfortunately, for an old geezer like me, it just feels more clunky than anything. Although, speaking of clunky, Pokemon Ruby actually did a lot of things to reduce that feeling. HP and XP meters actually moved smoothly, unlike back in the prior generation, and navigating menus were a lot more fluid. The square-to-square walking, though, still had a feeling of jank to it, but still an improvement from before. The graphics get a 9 out of 10. Yet another example of the benefits of new hardware. The Game Boy Advance's far superior sound chip allowed the composers to go full ham on new music for this game, now being able to use digital versions of actual instruments rather than the chip sounds of the old Game Boy. The game's tunes popped. All the environment music sounded charming and layered, and listening to them on repeat really did not get tiring. All the battle music though, while they are better in fidelity, they're also kind of forgettable, almost generic sounding. They felt like they were attempting to recapture the charm of the first Pokemon games, but it just falls flat in my opinion. A shame really, because everything else audibly about this game is still very well put together. The sound effects did a good balanced job similar to the gameplay itself. Some old sounds from the Game Boy era came back, like menu sounds and the save sound effect. They were just so iconic that it was a no-brainer to bring them back. Battle sounds did well to convey the feeling of combat. Standard hits sounded very impactful, but the sound for an ineffective hit was raw and rough, while a super effective hit was an inspiring sound that really made you feel like you made a correct choice of attack. Of course, there's also the Pokemon's calls as well, all very clear and distinct from each other. It was also a great touch to have them call out when they make audible attacks. And when a Pokemon goes down, the pitch and tone shift in the call change to match the feeling of a fainting creature. The music and sound get a 9 out of 10. While I did purchase a Game Boy Advance basically near launch, I didn't rush to get Generation 3's entries, and didn't start playing this until sometime later in 2009. Generation 4 was already out by then, but I figure I should try to at least play Generation 3's entries first, especially when I saw it going for a good price in a used bin. It was by this time that I was still renting a home with some buddies. Being early in my career, I was very focused on home, work, then come home again, chill with the roommates for a bit, then wind down for the next day to do it all again. And it was these few hours before sleeping where I sunk into this game. Some nights, I made the mistake of maybe getting too into the game, and a good night's rest was a distant dream sometimes. Oops. By then, it had been nearly a decade since I had last played a new Pokemon game, but I was finding myself going back to Pokemon Red often. I didn't get into Pokemon Gold, but somehow Ruby just called out to me, and it was actually quite a blast to play something so familiar, but with renewed wonder as what could be unknown when playing a new game. The nostalgia hit gets a 9 out of 10. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire had some pretty big expectations before release, especially with the move to a more powerful handheld console. Many were waiting to see what new and exciting things would come out of this third entry, and while a lot of the game was new in many aspects, those looking at the surface level critiqued how easy and same like the others the game was. Despite this though, the game had garnered over 8 million copies sold worldwide by the end of 2003, and that number has also doubled since then, making it the best-selling game on the Game Boy Advance. Mind you, that's not even taking into account the 2014 remakes of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that were released on the 3DS. A total 3D remake, these versions also sold 14 million copies as of 2023. With new moves, new Pokemon, added abilities, additional distractions, an updated but familiar graphical look, and some great overworld tunes, Pokemon Ruby is an excellent entry to the Pokemon franchise, and even more so if you take the time to really dive deeper.